me this week, be careful what you wish for, it might come true. And I had wished for publicity for my group, the Freethinkers of Ventura County, and I don't know if everybody knows why you're here or who put this together, but I'm Charlotte Poe, and I'm the founder and the president of the Freethinkers of Ventura County. I'm not going to go on about my group, but I do want you to look at this. If anybody wants to know about my group, I just bought a new domain name last week, and it's ftvc.org. So if you'd like information or you want to know about joining or when our meetings are, you can go to this website. Also, let's see, toward the back of the room on the wall, I taped up a little a thing of coming attractions for our group. It talks about when the next meeting is, and I put together a luncheon that's going to be this Friday because I had so many calls. I can't believe my phone was ringing off the hook today, but I've had calls the whole week long, and a number of you expressed an interest in joining. So I put together a luncheon this Friday, and you can look at the piece of paper over there to see when and where. But I wanted to get something social started for the people who are interested. And thanks so much to Tom Fiskin standing over there for writing the article in the Star. I had bought the Star for quite a while to write an article about me, and I'm glad he finally did. Thank you. Okay. Thanks so much for putting $2 in the bucket at the front door. That's just for the cost of the room. Thank you so much. There are soft drinks in the back if you can get there. Feel free to get up and risk losing your seat, but there's soft drinks and water in the back. The restrooms are out this door and to the left. Men's and women's are both over there. Okay, we are having TV coverage. Two of our members, Don Smith and Roger Lamanna, have a cable TV show on Adelphia Cable out of Westlake Village, and their TV show is called The Cutting Edge. So I'm not sure when this is going to air, but as soon as you find out, let me know and I'll put it on the website. And I told people that I was going to find out if we could get copies of this tape to perhaps sell after the event as well. Okay? The topic tonight is, should creationism be taught in the schools along with evolution? And we're going to try to get the speakers to stay on topic. And we have a moderator behind me, Ross Olney. I wouldn't introduce everyone, but we do have a moderator who's going to be keeping strict time. And so we have timed everything down to the minute to make sure that we have time to get everything in. The speaker should be done speaking by about 9 o'clock, and then I wanted to leave some time for questions and answers. The only questions we are accepting are on index cards, and some of those were going around the room. I don't know if all of you got index cards, but there were some big stacks going around. And if you have a question, write it down and look for somebody with a Freethinker sticker or badge on, and they'll help you get the questions over to me. And I'm just going to look through them and make sure we don't have a bunch of duplicates. I don't want to keep asking the same questions. Okay. Okay, I'm going to just read a couple of very short biographies for everyone here. Okay. First of all, our moderator behind me, Mr. Ross Olney. He's an author with more than 150 published books, hundreds of magazine and newspaper stories, and is a newspaper columnist. He is well known in our area as a teacher, public speaker, and moderator of meetings such as what we are enjoying this evening. Now, Dr. Charles Weiss. Oh, okay. Dr. Charles Weiss is sitting over there. Okay, he's the current Ventura County Superintendent of Schools, a position he has held since 1993. He is serving his second four-year term. He also serves as part-time faculty in the Graduate School of Education at Cal State University Northridge and Pepperdine University. Dr. Weiss is involved with many community boards, committees, and commissions, too numerous to mention here. He is the recipient of numerous awards for distinguished service in the field of education. I feel honored that he has made time for us this evening. Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce, on this end, we have Ron Matthews, who serves on the Ventura County Board of Education. And I also have been informed that today is Ron's birthday. Okay, seated next to Ron is Dr. Dwayne Gish. He serves as Senior Vice President of the Institute for Creation Research in San Diego, where he works with Dr. Henry Morris. He has published approximately 40 technical articles in scientific journals. He is the author of numerous articles and several books on the subject of the scientific evidence for creation. Dr. Gish is one of the Institute's... Dr. Gish is one of the Institute's most sought-after speakers and debaters, having participated in nearly 300 debates. Dr. Gish is a member of the American Chemical Society and is a fellow of the American Institute of Chemists. He is one of the founders and a longtime board member of the Creation Research Society. Okay, then over... on the far table, in the white shirt, we have Dr. Michael Shermer. He's the publisher. The director of the Skeptic Society, and the host of the Skeptic Science Lecture Series at Caltech. He is the author of Why People Believe Weird Things, How We Believe, The Search for God in an Age of Science, and Denying History, Who Says the Holocaust Never Happened, and Why Do They Say That? He is the co-host and producer of the Fox Family television series, Exploring the Unknown. On Saturday, October 7th, the Skeptic Society will present a one-day seminar featuring one of the best-known and highly decorated scientists of our age, Dr. Stephen Jay Gould. I will turn the mic over to Mr. Olney, who will explain the rules.
Thank you, Charlotte. And that concludes our meeting. I have been assured by building maintenance that it's only 71 degrees in here. But they said that when another meeting ends somewhere else, they'll be able to cool it off here a little more. I'm not sure how that works. I'd like to introduce our official timekeeper, Sailor Milton. He'll be sitting here. Stand up, Sailor. He will keep the official time, and I will react to whatever Sailor says on the time, and you'll see here in just a moment that we're running this in a very timely way. Dr. Weiss will give a up to 10 minute. I'm not sure, Dr. Weiss, how long, but you said up to 10 minutes. Well, we'll just wait. Dr. Weiss will state evolution creationism in Ventura County Public Schools. And my understanding is, Dr. Weiss, that you're a neutral in this. We will then flip a coin. Gentlemen, did you agree on a coin flip to see who goes first? All right, we'll flip a coin to see who goes first. Either Dr. Gish or Dr. Shermer, each of whom will have 25 minutes to make their remarks on the subject, should creationism be taught alongside evolution in the public schools?
Ross, since we're starting early, maybe they can both get 30 minutes since we're 10 minutes early.
30 minutes.
Well, Charlotte is in charge, and she says it will be 30 minutes.
Just because I spoke fast.
Let me change my notes. And I assume that our timekeeper heard that also. Following the remarks, and in whatever order we decide to do them in just a moment here, there will be a 5-minute direct rebuttal of the comments of the other person. Then we'll begin a question and answer period, which according to my schedule here says 9:05. You will write your questions down, and I believe there are some things circulating. I will ask the questions from the podium to whomever they are addressed. Excuse me. That's democracy. That's democracy in action. This thing is going to give us. I'm sorry to tell you that these guys are going to hand this microphone back and forth in just a little bit. So it's what we're going to do here is one side or the other will get a question. They have 2 minutes to answer it. The other side will then have 2 minutes to rebut the answer. So whichever side answers, the other side will rebut, and so forth, back and forth, until 2 tomorrow morning. At which time we have to be out of this room. We have to be out of this room at 10 o'clock. And we're told by then it will be cool in this room. I think then that we should get started with our coin flip. You want to flip? Oh, that's right. Yes, Dr. Weiss is going to speak first. Then we will flip a coin. And it'll be my great, very big pleasure in this modern day and age to bring you the microphone. And I will ask you to pass it back.
Pleasing that on a Monday night we're going to start the festivities with a coin toss. For those of you Monday night football fans, it seems to be all fits. Thank you for coming this evening. I appreciate all this public interest in a public education issue. And I appreciate all of you coming here to listen and learn, and hopefully you'll get out of this evening what you came to get. My portion of the evening is not to talk about whether or not creation science or evolution ought to be taught in classrooms, but whether it can be taught. In Ventura County schools, creationism is not taught in science classes for a very specific reason. And it comes to 6 court cases that guide our action. All elected officials, not an elected county superintendent of schools, but all elected officials take an oath when they're sworn into office that says they will uphold the Constitution of the state and the Constitution of the nation. And so we look to laws to tell us what to implement. On this issue, the laws are fairly clear. Back in 1968, Epperson versus Arkansas, a U.S. Supreme Court decision, invalidated an Arkansas statute that prohibited the teaching of evolution. The court held the statute unconstitutional on the grounds that the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution does not permit a state to require that teaching and learning must be tailored to the principles or prohibitions of any particular religious sect or doctrine. In 1981, Seagraves versus the state of California, the California State Board of Education Science Framework was challenged. And that's the framework that came out just before this one in 1990. And basically what that held was that any speculative statements concerning origins both in text and in class should be represented conditionally, not dogmatically. In 1982, in McLean versus the Arkansas Board of Education, a federal court held that a balanced treatment statute violated the Establishment Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Basically, in Arkansas, there was supposed to be a balance between creation science and evolutionary science in classrooms. In their decision, they said that while the subject of life origin is within the province of biology, the scientific community does not consider the subject as part of evolutionary theory, which assumes the existence of life and is directed to an explanation of how life evolved after it originated. The theory of evolution does not presuppose either the absence or the presence of a creator. In 1987, Edwards versus Aguilar, the U.S. Supreme Court held that Louisiana had an unconstitutional creationism act. This statute prohibited the teaching of evolution in public schools except when it was accompanied by instruction in creation science. They said that the court found that by advancing the religious beliefs that a supernatural being created humankind, which is embraced by the term creation science, the act impermissibly endorses a religion. In 1990, Webster versus the New Atlantic School District, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals found that a school district may prohibit a teacher from teaching creation science in fulfilling its responsibility to ensure that the First Amendment's Establishment Clause is not violated and religious beliefs are not injected into the public school curriculum. The court upheld a district court finding that the school district had not violated Webster's free speech. Webster was the teacher. Webster's free speech rights when it prohibited from teaching creation science, since it is a form of religious advocacy. And finally, the 6th case. In 1994, in Pelosa versus the Capistrano School District here in California, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a district court finding that a teacher's First Amendment right to free exercise of religion is not violated by a school district's requirement that evolution be taught in biology classes. It rejected the plaintiff's definition of a religion, that evolutionism was a religion. So following that, the science framework, which is the guide that the California State Board of Education provides to school districts, has in it two parts that relate to this topic. One is a Board of Education policy on the teaching of natural sciences. One part of that says that discussions of any scientific fact, hypothesis, or theory related to the origins of the universe, the earth, and of life, and then they have in parentheses the how, are appropriate to the science curriculum. Discussions of defined creation, ultimate purpose, or ultimate causes, the why, are appropriate to the history, social science, and English language arts curriculum. It goes on to say that nothing in science or in any other field of knowledge shall be taught dogmatically. That a dogma is a system of beliefs that is not subject to scientific test or repudiation. It also says that to be fully informed, citizens and students do not have to accept everything that is taught in a natural science curriculum, but they do have to understand the major strands of scientific thought. Let's see. Neither the California nor the United States Constitution requires, in order to accommodate the religious views of those who object to certain material or activities that are presented in science classes, that time be given to the curriculum to those particular religious views. So in other words, if you teach something that someone does is opposed to their religion, you don't have to necessarily teach the opposite perspective. Nothing in the California Education Code allows students or their parents to excuse class attendance based on disagreement with the curriculum, except to specify certain topics dealing with reproductive biology or laboratory dissection of animals. Then, in a specific section of the framework on evolution, it states that evolution is the central organizing theory of biology, and that they state that it's no more controversial in scientific circles than the theories of gravitation or electron flow. I thought some of the room may disagree with that, but that's what it says. Regardless of whether the changes in plants or animals are gradual or sporadic, the evidence remains that plants and animals have evolved over time. Thus, the theory of evolution is the accepted scientific explanation of how these changes have occurred. And then finally it says, and this again is guidance to us on what to teach. Teachers should be aware that the theory of evolution has been tested and refined over 100 years. And that the majority of the criticisms that find their way into popularly circulated publications have not been validated scientifically. Usually the criticisms have been evaluated and rejected by the scientific community. Some students may be concerned about evolution and its bearing on their religious beliefs. Teachers and textbooks should make it very clear that from a scientific perspective, evolution, like other scientific topics, does not bear on an individual's religious beliefs. Science is not theistic, nor is it atheistic. It does not presuppose religious explanations. I think that gives a kind of a perspective on why in Ventura County the public schools do not implement creation science in science classrooms. But they do teach creationism and various forms of creationism as part of religious studies classes or studies of comparative religions. And so I hope that I've done my part in trying to give a perspective on what the law states and how it guides. Not should it be taught, but can it be taught in public schools in Ventura County? And clearly the answer is it cannot.
Dr. Weiss, thank you. Thank you very much. Is this working or not? It is not. All right. I'll shout. Before we flip a coin, can you hear me in the back? Before we flip a coin, I would like to mention that questions that you write as the program goes on, please write on them to whom they are addressed, so that when they get up to me, I'll know who to address it to. The questions can include Ron Matthews on this side and Dr. Weiss on the far side, as well as the two principal speakers. And finally, and very important, we have subjects here that people are very clear-cut in their own mind on. Let's refrain, other than a polite applause. Let's don't boo or hiss or, because we're going to get it. You know what he's going to do to you if you... It would be nice if we had no demonstrations at all. I don't mind a little polite applause, but we bordered on that just a moment ago, is why I bring that up. We will tolerate no booing. Everybody has a right. This is a free thinkers group. Everybody has a right to their opinion and to their thoughts. Let's see who's going to speak first. All right, you're ahead.
So heads I win and tails he
Oh,
loses.
come on. If it comes, that'll be with you, right? If it's ahead, you're first.
Wait, I get my telekinetic powers ready. It works.
Third demonstration.
Heads it is. Well, it was 75 years ago in July and the first week of August that the Scopes trial happened in Tennessee. And if you've ever been in Tennessee in August, it's a lot like this. And in fact, what they did was they adjourned the courtroom and went outside, which is what we should do, except there's no PA system out there and it's dark. So I guess. So I'm not going to apologize for being so hot. It's just hot. And I normally ride a bike 2 to 3 hours every day, and I missed today, so I'm making up for it here, I guess. So I'm just going to roll up my sleeves and get to work, if that's all right with you guys. Should creationism be taught in public schools? No. Thank you. You can apply. There's no booing. This is not a free speech issue. Let's be clear about that. Creationists can print or say anything they like. That's guaranteed in our Constitution. I am a civil libertarian. In fact, actually, I'm not a member of any organized political party. I'm a libertarian, which is why they're never going to get big. They're not organized. But we do believe that people should be free to print and say whatever they want, and the creationists can certainly do so. Creationists are free to found their own public schools, or their own private schools, and they're free in those private schools to teach whatever they like. They can homeschool if they want. There's all sorts of options. However, for whatever reason, the government has decided it would undertake the education of our children over a century ago, and it would mandate this and force kids to go to school because that's what we, the public, apparently have decided we want to do. So given that, we have a potential conflict. That is, parents who pay taxes, therefore are paying for these public schools, feel they should have a say in what their kids are being taught. So it is understandable that parents do become concerned about certain things that are taught that may not agree with their personal social, political, economic, and religious beliefs. And that's what democracy is all about. That's why we vote. And so one of the reasons we're here is to, at least as far as I'm concerned, why I'm here, is to ensure that you get out and vote for the people who will vote that creationism should not be taught in public schools for the reasons I'm going to go over here. And of course, that's true with all issues. I mean, Roe v. Wade, it could come down to the vote of one person to turn that around. That's why it's important in democracy that we get out and vote and have our say here. And also, we should make it clear that it's perfectly fine for creationism to be taught in history classes, social studies classes, comparative mythology classes. This is where it's perfectly legitimate. It's a part of American culture. It's a long, important part of our history, and it's interesting to know. It's interesting stuff. There's a lot of good books on this. I teach in my own courses on the history of the evolution-creation debate, and that's where it belongs. But that's not what we're here to discuss. What creationists want is they want it taught in science classes. Why? Because we live in an age of science, and they want their particular religious beliefs to be taught as factual, true, with a capital T, and that their religion is the one true, right religion, and all the others are wrong, or at best, they're myths, and theirs are actual scientific facts. So there you have the conflict. It's not being taught in public schools. Their particular beliefs are not being taught in public school science courses. And since we live in the age of science, they want the legitimacy conveyed by science in those kinds of classes. To do so, as we've just heard, they have tried to pass legislation. If you cannot win in the court of public appeal, or the marketplace of the free marketplace of ideas, then another alternative, unfortunately, in our society, is you turn to the law. You can't get what you want through hard work and enterprise and making your voice heard, then you turn to government to enforce it on people. And that's what has happened since the Scopes trial in 1925 through the Arkansas trial, Louisiana trial, and you heard the short history of that. And to do so, they've changed their names. They used to be the creationists, then they're creation scientists, then scientific creationists, abrupt appearance theorists, irreproducible complexity theorists, intelligent design theorists. The intelligent design theory is the IDT, or just ID. That's the latest incarnation of the creationists. All it is changing the name. The core stays the same. The core of the arguments stay the same. It's easy for creationists to give lectures and do debates because they don't have to change their notes. They just have to scratch out the name and put in a new name. Unfortunately, when you do science, it's constantly changing, and so your pages don't become yellowed. You make your pages on the way up to the debate because things are constantly changing. Now, what does this mean to say that an intelligent designer designed our universe or the world or life or whatever it is? And we should note that there's lots of different brands of creationism. You'll hear one version tonight, Dr. Gish's, that this is not the only kind. There's dozens of different kinds, and they fight amongst themselves about which is the correct interpretation of creation science and so on, and that's fine. But when we say, in general, what are they arguing? What they're arguing is that the intelligent designer did it, whoever that is. Id did it. Well, who is this id, and how did it do it? Well, let's be honest. Who are we talking about here? Who is id? Id, of course, is God, and what we want to know is, how did she do this? How did she make this universe? Now, what they've been doing over the decades is chasing what's called the God of the gaps argument. Wherever there's a gap, that's where it jumped in to do it. God did. It's like that Sidney Harris cartoon, with the scientist at the chalkboard with the equations, and then in the middle there with a little arrow, and a miracle happens. Well, what that means is, I don't know what the heck happened here, so we're just going to say God did it, it did it, something happened, a miracle happened. But we can't really do that in science, because what science is an attempt to understand the natural explanations for these phenomena. Now, what creationists want is a place at the table of science. But they want it without, or with, this additional component of a supernatural element added. That every once in a while they want to be able to say, it did it. Now, where do they say it did it? Well, it depends on when in the sequence of science history you're talking about. Earlier in the century, last century, well, no, because the millennium actually doesn't end until anyway. When there were certain gaps in scientific knowledge, that's where it did it. But then those gaps got filled in. Scientists answered a number of questions, and so creationists moved along and picked new gaps. And the latest one is at the molecular level, because we have a lot of gaps there. They're still filling in. It's a relatively new science, the origins of life, and so on. So, for example, one of the latest intelligent design theorists' arguments is that the flagellum in a little single-cellular organism, the most common type you're familiar with is the sperm, and they have a little flagellum which, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your situation, they can be really powerful swimmers and get to where they're heading. And the question is, how does that little flagellum rotate around? It's really an amazingly complex structure. It requires all sorts of little components that all have to be there at the same time. And difficult to see how a Darwinian gradualistic method or mechanism would have created that flagellum. Okay, so anyway, the people that study this thing, they have different theories about how it came together, how it evolved, and they haven't any agreement on that. So that's the latest gap. That's where it did it. Id jumped in and created the little flagellum. Now it didn't bother with things like the beaks and finches and the Galapagos, because we know how that happened. So it doesn't bother with those things anymore. It is busy with flagellum, little sperm tails. That's what it is doing. Now, if you want a place at the scientific table, what does it mean to say God did it? What does that give us? What does that look like when you're doing science? You're sitting there at the lab. You got your electron microscope and you're studying. And then, and you figured out this mechanism, and you've got that mechanism, and you got this chemical working, and so on, and you got it all figured out, except then you come to a blank spot. You're not sure where to go from there. What do you do if you're a creation scientist? Apparently, you just stop and say, beats me. That's where God did it, and you're done for the day, and you go home. I guess. I have for the life of me, and I've met all these guys, talked to them, debated and lectured with them, had beer and pizza with some of them, you know, that's where the action is anyway, and asked them, what would this look like? What do you do when you do science? And I never get an answer, because they're not doing science. All right, here's the deal. You want to be taught in public science classes. Here's how you do it. You get your ideas into the textbooks and the teaching syllabi of the teachers who teach it. How do you do that? The people that write these textbooks are scientists who go to scientific conferences. They publish in scientific journals, and they write scientific books. That's how you do it. You do science. You can't just say you're doing it. I've been to Dr. Gish's Institute for Creation Research in San Diego, California. It's a nice place, but there's no science going on there at all. It's true they have some electronic equipment. They've got a coffee pot, typewriter, and stuff like that. But there's no science being done. I go to scientific conferences regularly. We hold them at Caltech all the time. I never see any of these guys at any conferences. Not paleontology conferences, not geology conferences, no biology conferences, no molecular biology conferences. They do not publish in peer-reviewed journals. They don't write peer-reviewed books. They don't appear at conferences to lecture. They don't present their ideas. That's how science is done. Science is not a thing. It's not this body of knowledge, this august thing that we have sworn allegiance to. It's a method. It's just a process of asking questions about nature and trying to answer them. That's it. If you want to do science, that's what you do. If you already know the answers to the questions ahead of time, and then you go searching for anything, evidence you can find to fit it, that's not science. Now, there are organizations that do this. There's one in Pasadena called Reasons to Believe. And what they are doing, and from their perspective, it's perfectly legitimate. All of these arguments, from the creationists, the intelligent design creationists, the abrupt appearance theorists, the irreducible complexity, and blah, blah, blah. What these are reasons to believe if you already believe. These are reinforcements of your faith if you're already a faithful person. Now, whether that's a legitimate thing to do or not, if you're religious, that's not my bailiwick. But that's what people do. I wrote a whole book about this. It is a massive study on this, asking people why they believe in God. The number one reason people give for why they believe in God is the good design and complexity of the universe. To most people, it looks designed. You can't imagine how it could have come about other than an intelligent designer. And by the way, when you ask them, why do you think other people believe in God? Yeah, okay, so there's a denouement to this, okay? When you ask people why they think other people believe in God, the number one reason they give is emotional need and comfort. You might want to clap for that. Okay, so if you want to do science and be taken seriously, that's it. It's really simple. Just go do it. Quit talking about it. Quit changing your name. Just do it. It's very simple. Now on the other side, and you're going to give us a little 5-minute when we're closing. Okay. It's not just that we should keep these things separated because it's good for science, or it's good for us non-believers, or secular types, or humanists, or whatever. That's not why we should keep these separated. We should keep science and religion separated because it's better for religion if you do this. It's better for religious, faithful people if you do this. Now, this is counterintuitive at first, but if you think about this, the reason the Founding Fathers set up this establishment clause, this wall, is because the only people that want the government involved in religion are the members of the dominant religion. Nobody else wants that. But of course, in America today, the dominant religion is the Judeo-Christian religion, and it's not the Judeo part, it's the Christian part that wants the government in there regulating and getting involved in religion. And the reason this is bad is that we can say with near 100% certainty, based on the history of civilization over the last 6,000 years, is that whenever government and states get involved in religion, it's bad news for religion. This is where pogroms happen, and holocausts, and genocides, and witch burnings. That's how it happens. So religion by itself is not inherently dangerous. It can be, but not on a large scale. It becomes exceptionally dangerous when it's coupled to a state. It takes state power to destroy masses of people and to subjugate belief systems. The whole point of keeping them separate, to keep government out of the religion business, is to protect religion. If you are religious, this is how you should vote. You should vote to keep religion out of the science business. That's not where it belongs. It doesn't belong in public schools. Because if you think about this, if we're going to take a bigger perspective, not just the American Christian perspective, the bigger perspective, once you open the door, which religions are you going to teach in these public science school classes? Because although creationists are passionately adamant that theirs is the one true religion, I can assure you, from having talked to lots of religious people, they all feel that way. So which of the different creation stories are we going to teach? In weird things, I just list a few. In the last 10,000 years, there's been roughly 10,000 different religions and proposals for different gods. Which god is it, by the way? Which god do we teach? Which creation story are we going to teach? The Jainists of India, where the world has always existed as it is now, unchanging from eternity? Or the creation story of the Gilbert Islanders, Indo-Chinese, Koreans, and Sumera Babylonians, where you have the slain monster creation story? Or that of the Cook Islanders, Egyptians, Greeks, and Tahitians, where you have primordial parents creation story? The world was created by the interaction of primordial parents. Cosmic egg creation story of the Hindus, Japanese, Persians, and Samoans, and so on. You get the point. Now, what the creationists argue is, yeah, but I know, but ours actually is the one true right one, and all those others are wrong, and it's true everybody believes like I do that they're right, but I really am right. I really do have the evidence. And it's not just a coincidence that in 6,000 years I'm the only one who got it right. I really am the one who got it right. The hubris there is remarkable. The arrogance, the lack of perspective, the lack of a sort of a global look at humanity and history and what other people have done and thought. It's just remarkably narrow there. What's going on here and why I'm here is because there is a sizable and powerful movement upfront today, and not just through the Institute for Creation Research and some of these other groups, but in particular this intelligent design theorists and what I call the new creationists. They're much more dangerous to this problem of separating the church and state because they have more money, they have more academic credibility, and this is by design. A couple of years ago, Howard Amundsen of the Amundsen Foundation that gives all the money for PBS, that built the Amundsen Theater in Los Angeles, Howard Amundsen gave $1.5 million to the Seattle-based Discovery Institute, which is the Center for the Renewal of Science and Culture. The purpose of the $1.5 million grant, $1.5 million grant, is, and I quote, to unseat not just Darwinism, but also Darwinism's cultural legacy, and to establish a Christian nation. I thought we were a Christian nation, according to all the conservative right, but nevertheless. We intend these apologetics seminars. Apologetics is, it's not Christians apologizing, it's reasons to believe, defense for why you believe. We intend these apologetic seminars to encourage and equip believers with new scientific evidences that support the faith, as well as to popularize ideas in the broader culture. New scientific evidence to support the faith. So here's how it works. Here's what we already believe. It is factual and true. Here is from the Creation Research Society itself. The Bible is the written word of God. All of its assertions are historically and scientifically true in all of the original autographs. This means that the account of origins of Genesis is a factual presentation of simple historical truth. This is a statement of belief of the Creation Research Society. In other words, we're going to start off with what we know. So I can't be accused of like making this up. They just said they believe this, right? Okay, that's fine. That's fine, but that's not science. In science, you don't start off with, here's the set of beliefs ahead of time before we start our research that we are absolutely, positively going to hold to no matter what the evidence says. Now, let's go looking for evidence to fit it. This is called the confirmation bias in psychology, in cognitive studies. You're not allowed to do this in science. This is not science. This is pseudoscience, voodoo science. It's nonsense. Now, you can do that for faith and religion. You can do anything you want. That's fine. If that's all you do, I don't care. It's none of my business. Do it. But don't pretend that's science. That isn't science. And what these guys want to do is infiltrate public schools. They've lost all the top-down battles. They've given up on it. Okay, you keep changing the name, and we keep figuring it out. So now the goal is a bottom-up. It's a bottom-up through public schools, through parent-teacher organizations, through school board members. That's why we're here tonight. They have a 20-year goal to become the dominant perspective in science, to be applied to specific fields, including molecular biology, biochemistry, paleontology, physics, and cosmology. They want to see intelligent design theory permeate our religious, cultural, moral, and political life. Okay, this is called the wedge. They actually go to their webpage. You see, it's the wedge. They want to drive a wedge into the weak points of the Darwinian, materialistic viewpoint and cause the tree to come crashing down and replace it with religion, their narrow, one particular kind of religion, into American politics. Folks, they're attacking the Constitution. They want to topple it. They want this to become a theocracy, plain and simple. That's the truth. You can find it on the webpage in their literature. That's what they want. They won't tell you that publicly, but that is what they want. That's the ultimate result here. How am I doing?
I'll let you know when you got 5.
We're at 5?
No, that's
okay. Now, I'll read one quote from, I wasn't going to quote Gish because he quotes himself so well. He says, and I quote, "And so neither creationism nor evolution is a testable scientific theory. They are theories about history. They are historical sciences." Well, that may be true for you. If creationism is not a testable scientific theory, then apparently it should not be taught in scientific classes. Surely agree with that. Now, probably said this is taken out of context. All right, well, you can explain it. But here's the problem. Lots of sciences are historical sciences. They're a little more difficult to do than the stereotypical physics experiment because you have to tease apart variables of events that happened in the past. But cosmologists practice historical science, geologists practice historical science, paleontologists, archaeologists, and human historians. I guess all historians are human. Historians of the human condition, that's what they're saying. And so one of the misunderstandings, I think the difficulties people have with evolution is that it happens over such a long time scale that in our personal time scale of mere decades, it's really difficult to intuitively grasp. And we evolved over the last 5 million years since we branched off from the other primates in an environment in which there was not reading, and laboratories and experimental methods. We basically survive by the seat of our pants, a kind of intuitive reasoning. So science is new, and teasing apart variables, testing hypotheses, this does not come natural. It's difficult to understand that the Earth rotates, for example. It doesn't feel like it rotates. Even in our language, the sun rose this morning. It didn't rise. You know it didn't rise, but it's hard to get away from it because intuitively it doesn't seem right. So I think part of the problem here is that as a historical science, we don't get enough training in this, which is, again, why we need to teach this more in public schools, not less, more, to get past that hurdle of that intuitive grasp of what actually happened over many millions and even billions of years. Finally, let me just make a comment on the relationship of science and religion. I wrote a whole book about this called How We Believe, and it really does have to do with beliefs. Most of us come to our beliefs, and most of our beliefs, most of the time, not through rational arguments. We are influenced by our parents and our siblings and our peer groups and our teachers. There's all sorts of social, cultural, personal influences on all of our beliefs. And typically what we do then, when these get solidified, is we look for things to fit it, to confirm that it's true. That's the normal psychological thing that everybody does, including scientists. The difference here is that science is particularly set up and designed to get around this confirmation bias that I'm talking about. It's set up so that you have checks and balances, that somebody will test your hypothesis, that you test your hypothesis, and if you don't, somebody else will. And before you get to the peer-reviewed published stage, hopefully you've chatted with somebody and you've asked your friends if you've been tripped up, if you've been biased, if you're seeing it incorrectly, and so on, because it's so easy to do, so tempting to do. And so by the time, hopefully, you get your peer-reviewed published book from a university press, you've gone through all these things. You've caught all those biases. Even there, of course, you don't always do it, and somebody may.
In the fossil record. What does that fossil record reveal? There are rocks called Cambrian rocks. They're found all over the world. Supposedly began to form, according to evolutionists, say 520, 530 million years ago. 20 years ago, they said it was 600 million years ago, but they lost 80 million years somehow. But anyhow, they have these Cambrian rocks. And in those Cambrian rocks are billions, times billions, probably times billions again, of fossils of very complex invertebrates, clams and snails and trilobites, worms, brachiopods, sponges, and things like that. Underneath the Cambrian rocks are so-called pre-Cambrian rocks, which evolutionists believe were laid down during hundreds of millions of years leading up to and preceding the Cambrian. Many of these pre-Cambrian rocks are undisturbed, perfectly suitable for the preservation of fossils. If the fossils were there, we certainly would find them. What must we find in these pre-Cambrian rocks if evolution is true? If you went from a little microscopic organism to these complex invertebrates, of course, we must find billions times billions of fossils of those evolutionary ancestors. The evolutionary ancestors for trilobites, for clams, snails, and so forth, and so on. They believe fossils of little microscopic soft-bodied single-celled bacteria in those rocks. If you can find those, you can certainly find the evolutionary ancestors. And there are the so-called ediacaran found all over the world. But those are soft-bodied, and evolutionists say they could not have been the ancestors of the Cambrian. The Cambrian creatures all appear fully formed with absolutely no ancestors and no intermediate forms. Dr. Spatula, in his book Evolutionary Biology, 2nd edition, 1985, on page 325, that explains these Cambrian animals are so vastly different from one another, they're placed in separate phyla. He says this: it is considered likely that all the animal phyla became distinct before or during the Cambrian, for they all appear fully formed without intermediates connecting one phylum to another. End of quote. Ladies and gentlemen, evolution is dead. Evolution is absolutely dead. We have several hundred million years of evolution producing this vast array of complex invertebrates and not leave a trace. And don't appeal to say they were soft-bodied. They could not have evolved directly from soft-bodied creatures. Evolutionists say that.
And furthermore, we find fossils of many soft-bodied creatures. The snail, worms, and jellyfish and things like that. Many of those things are found. The fact is, no one has ever found a single transitional form or ancestor for those complex invertebrates. And all of us supposedly evolved from one of them. They didn't have any ancestor, neither did we. Furthermore, evolutionists claim or believe, they must believe, that some invertebrate evolved into a fish. A worm, perhaps, a clam or snail, something evolved into a fish. Of course, where else would fishes come from? Well, we have billions times billions of fossils of the invertebrates. We have billions and billions and billions of fossils of all the major kind of fishes. If evolution is true, we must have billions times billions of fossils of the transitional form from an invertebrate, some invertebrate, and a fish. We don't have even one, ladies and gentlemen. Every major kind of fish that we know anything about appears fully formed, no trace of ancestors, no trace of any intermediates connecting one kind to another. Now, I would challenge Dr. Sherman to explain how you can have 100 million years or millions of years of evolution converting an invertebrate into a fish, into a vertebrate, and not leave a trace. I've given that to many paleontologists, and on my debates, and not one has been able to answer that challenge. And evolutionists know this. I have an anti-creationist book by Dr. Strahler. He discusses this. He says, Gish is right. In my fossil book, he said we have no ancestors for the fishes. There are no transitional forms. He says we all must be nolo contendere. That's no defense. Well, there is no defense. Absolutely. And that destroys evolution. Ladies and gentlemen, this fossil evidence of the total lack of transitional forms, these complex invertebrates and for the fishes, simply destroys evolution. As far as I'm concerned, the debate is over with. Evolution has not taken place on this planet. On the other hand, the abrupt appearance of those complex invertebrates with no ancestors, no transitional forms, the abrupt appearance of the fishes with no ancestors and no transitional forms is absolutely what we must predict from the basis of creation. Now, I know evolution claims, oh, we have truckloads of transitional forms. I don't want a truckload, just try out a few. You see, all of these claims are disputable and questionable. Even evolutionists argue among themselves. Is Archaeopteryx a transitional form, or is it not? Is Australopithecus a transition between ape or man? Is it not? Most say it is, many say it isn't. But here, the evidence is clear. There's no doubt, there's no question about the nature of the evidence we have. No transitional form, no ancestors for the invertebrates or the fishes. Now I want to deal with something that's fundamental here, and that's the second law of thermodynamics. Now listen very carefully. I know what you're going to say. Oh, now these creationists don't understand the second law. It only applies to isolated systems. Let me tell you, in the evolutionist view, the universe is an isolated system. Now what does the second law of thermodynamics say? The second law of thermodynamics says this: an isolated system, as the system in which no work is being done by anything on the outside, nothing comes in from the outside. An isolated system will go in one direction and one direction only. It will go downward. It will deteriorate. It will become less complex, less ordered. Never, never, never does it become more complex, more highly ordered, more organized. And yet evolutionists believe there was some hypothetical cosmic egg billions of years ago that exploded. Out of that explosion, what happened? Produced hydrogen and helium gases. That is all. Mainly hydrogen gas. No uranium, nickel, lead, iron, no phosphorus or sulfur, or oxygen, nothing like that. Mainly hydrogen gas. And these gases spread out through the universe. That's all there was. Might as well say the universe was hydrogen gas. And somehow from these molecules of gas racing out at enormous speed and almost infinite space, stars created themselves, and galaxies created themselves. Eventually our solar system created itself. Life evolved on this planet and evolved all the way to people. Therefore, if what they're saying is true, then you and I, with our 30 trillion cells, our 12 billion brain cells, our 120 trillion connections, came ultimately from hydrogen gas. Because you see, ultimately there was nothing but hydrogen gas. Now there's people. If that's true, we can say that hydrogen is an odorless, tasteless, invisible gas, which, if given enough time, becomes people. Now, as a scientist, I find that notion absolutely incredible. I don't know how a rational person can believe it. Isn't it unbelievable what an unbeliever must believe in order to be an unbeliever. The universe is an isolated system. The second law would apply to its origin. Now, the Earth is not an isolated system. Of course, we get all that energy coming from the sun. We're supposed to have gases down here. But ultraviolet light and lightning does not convert simple molecules into complex molecules. It destroys them. What happens to you when you get hit by lightning? Do you become more complex? Lightning, ultraviolet light are destructive. The only reason life exists on the Earth, we have a layer of ozone around the Earth which absorbs the deadly destructive ultraviolet light, allowing visible light to penetrate, and because we have green plants that convert that visible light into chemistry, into chemical molecules. That's why life can exist. The idea that life evolved on this Earth is a myth. Sir Fred Hoyle, a famous British astronomer, and his friend Chandler McRomsey became interested in this problem, the origin of life, many years ago. And this deals with this thermodynamic business. And they started out by making an assumption about what would be the minimum requirement to get life started. What would you have to have there in this hypothetical primitive ocean to get life started? Then they assumed that every star in the universe had a planet like the Earth. Well, that'd be a lot of planets. Then they suggested the universe was 20 billion years old. Using those assumptions, they calculated the probability of life, the probability of life evolving anywhere in the universe in that 20 billion years. They couldn't believe their results. According to their calculations, the probability was essentially nil. Sir Fred declared the probability of an evolutionary origin of life is equal to the probability that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard would assemble a Boeing 747. Now, I tell people, if you want to believe that, that's your privilege. Go ahead and believe it. But don't call it science, and don't teach it to your students. Random process, you had amino acids floating around in the ocean. Tons of it, billions of it, billions of tons floating around the ocean. The probability that you get one single protein molecule by chance, those amino acids, 20 different kinds, make it much less probable. But the 20 kinds of amino acids we have today, if they went together by chance, 1 trillion times a second, for 5 billion years, that wouldn't be the faintest possibility they'd come out the right way to make one single biological active protein.
1 minute.
The evolutionary origin of life is a myth. Ladies and gentlemen, there is much more that I could present. The evidence for design and purpose, ladies and gentlemen, are core. A physical constant in the universe must be exactly that way, not a little bit less, not a little bit more. Could they have come out of the Big Bang? I say, ladies and gentlemen, the most reasonable, logical, scientific statement that we can make about our origins today is still, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
We're going to learn here whether creationism should be taught alongside evolution in public schools sooner or later here. Now we have a 5-minute rebuttal time for each one of our principal speakers. Dr. Shermer, would you like to speak for 5 minutes?
Oh, okay. I was just saying, yeah. Are you passing the questions down so this way we can? Okay. Okay.
All right.
May I have your attention, please?
Quiet.
God has delivered him into my hands. The question of the debate tonight is, should creationism be taught in public schools, science classes? Let me point out, Dr. Gish didn't say a word about that. We heard nothing about that. All we heard was all the things he doesn't like about the theory of evolution. I'm sorry, I don't know what it is you're going to teach in science classes other than it did it. Okay, so let's see, where did the universe come from? Oh, it did it. Okay, you got that, students? Id, ID, did it. Okay, now, origins of life, id, did it. Origins of birds, id, did it. This is going to be the shortest science course ever taught in the history of public education. So, I'm sorry, the debate is over, and he lost. He said nothing about teaching creationism and why it should be taught in public schools. However, I don't want to give up my other 4 minutes, so. Dr. Gish talks about education's teaching both sides of a viewpoint. Well, of course. But which of the different religions, which of the different ids, there's been about 10,000 ids offered in the last 10,000 years. Which id are we going to teach to our public schools? Which God? Dr. Gibbs claims that evolutionists are non-theists. This is empirically false. 40% of American scientists surveyed in 1996 reported they believed in God. So this is simply not true. Dr. Gibbs says there is no criticism of evolution permitted in the academy, in science, in school, and universities, and so on. This is also empirically falsifiable, and it's falsified. It's not true. If you actually did science and went to conferences and read these journals, you would find out there's quite a heated debate about all this stuff. These guys get to the point where they hate each other. They won't even talk to each other, let alone no criticism, hardly. Evolution is a religion. Listen, if you want to define religion so broadly, then everything is a religion. And if everything is a religion, then nothing is a religion. He quotes Michael Ruse. Michael's a good friend of mine. He has just recently come out with this book, which is in part why he wrote this op-ed piece, because that's what authors do to promote their books, is they write op-ed pieces, in which he is critical of a handful of evolutionary biologists who have constructed or attempted to construct entire worldviews out of their science. And he's critical of them for that, and that's fine. I think that's good, because I think scientists sometimes do go beyond their data to try to construct worldviews. And look, we all attempt to do that. That's fine. And Ruse is just nailing him for that, and he's quoting on. That's okay. But hardly anybody actually does that. If you go into evolutionary biology classes, I mean, if you actually take these classes, you know, and you study it, this is unheard of. It never is spoken of. Where it's actually spoken of is after class, like down at the pub, you know, when you talk about the fun stuff and all that stuff. But when the science is being done, it's just science. If you go into these science classes, they're not talking about, you know, there is no God and you know, this kind of stuff. You just don't hear that. Humanism, he defined as a non-theistic religion. Well, I guess that's why I'm not a capital H humanist, but that's how it's defined, because I have no interest in being in a religion. So, but again, we have to finally parse and nuance our generalizations here. Not all humanists are non-believers. Lots of humanists believe. You can go to Unitarian humanists, and there are theistic humanists. Anyway, as I pointed out earlier, there's lots of different creationists. He's not the only kind. There's a whole bunch of different kinds. They argue amongst themselves. Same thing with humanists. You can't just generalize. Dr. Gish says that origins is not a science. We cannot have a science of origins. Well, maybe you can, and that's my point. You're not doing science. So when you get to the point of origins, all you're going to do is say, it did it. End of story. How amazingly, remarkably insular and uninteresting. How the lack of curiosity on the part of creationists to try to answer questions about these amazing phenomena. Where did the universe come from? Where did this bubble universe start? What does that mean, this quantum vacuum? How did these little molecules come together? It's such an interesting, difficult problem to solve. And there's a lot of smart people working on it. And the fact that they haven't all come up with a consensus on how it happened just tells us it's a hard problem. It's difficult to solve. It doesn't mean that it...
Thank you, Dr. Shermer. Dr. Gish, you have 5 minutes to reply.
Okay. He says, what religion do we want in the schools? We don't want any. We don't want the Judeo-Christian taught in the schools. We don't want your humanist religion, your non-theistic religion, Dr. Shermer. We don't want Hinduism. We don't want any of those taught. We want the scientific evidence taught devoid of any references to the Bible, to the Humanist Manifesto, or anything of that kind. We want pure science taught, the evidence. We are suggesting we compare a theistic, supernatural, spatial creation to a non-theistic, mechanistic, evolutionary theory. That's the two possibilities. That's what we want put in the schools, and it is perfectly legitimate and should be taught to our students. You say that Dr. Roos criticized only a handful of evolution. No, that's not the subject. That's not what I quoted here. He says evolution is a religion and is being taught as a religion. You say creationists can't get into the journal. I'll tell you why. To get an article published in a science journal, you must get by the editor and 3 referees. They will not approve anything questioning evolution theory or supporting creation. Yes, you can challenge any phylogeny. Yes, you can do that. You can challenge any mechanism of evolution. Yes, you can do that. But you don't dare challenge the fact of evolution. You don't dare to get there's a creationist alternative. That will not get into the journal. You say, why don't we publish? I'll tell you why. I've been turned down by the editors. I know why. They say, no, we won't publish your article. Michael Behe, who wrote Darwin's Black Box, a marvelous book by the scientist. There are many critical reviews. He sent a response to the science journal. Not one would publish his response. The only response was published by a journal on philosophy. That's all. That's why we don't get in there. But he did a study. And all these scientific problems, the immunological process, chemistry of eyesight, and so forth, he went through all of the evolutionary journals, and not one had any article explaining how these could have evolved. So evolutionists don't publish in scientific journals either. Now, how much time do I have? A couple of minutes or 3 minutes? Rob? 3 minutes. All right, I can use another minute here. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the evidence from the fossil record. I presented evidence from thermodynamics. I presented evidence from the laws of probability in the order of life. Isn't that scientific evidence? Isn't that scientific evidence for creation? Right. I don't know what you can do for evidence, but that is exactly what we predict. Now, I would like to close with this statement. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 or 4 centuries ago, the notion that the sun and other planets revolved around the earth was the dogma of the scientific establishment. And Galileo faced determined opposition from fellow astronomers when he suggested otherwise. They wouldn't even look through his telescope, by the way. Louis Pasteur and others, about a century ago, overturned the established dogma of centuries when they showed that living things never arise spontaneously from dead matter. Today, even though thousands of scientists are creationists, and the number is growing rapidly, the notion of evolution is a stifling dogma. Evolutionists seek to smother all challenges from within or without the scientific and educational establishment, concealing the fallacies and weaknesses of the theory, and adamantly opposing a hearing for the scientific case for creation. Why is this so? Certainly not because the notion of evolution is science and the concept of creation is ridiculous. I can think of 2 possibilities. First, it may be that evolutionists consider that our students are too ignorant, too illiterate to be exposed to these competing ideas of order. They must be protected from error, carefully indoctrinated in correct ideas by those who consider themselves to be the intellectual elite, the sole possessors of truth.
1 minute.
Secondly, having engendered this fragile tower of hypothesis piled on hypothesis, where fact and fiction intermingle in an inextricable confusion, it may be that evolutionists are aware of the fact that the notion of evolution will fare badly if exposed to an open and determined challenge from within creation scientists, and that if this is done, the majority of our students will accept creation as the better of the 2 concepts of origin. Whatever may be the case, it is urgent that our students be exposed to all the evidence, all of the arguments on each side of this question, show that these 2 alternative concepts of origin, creation and evolution, can compete freely in the marketplace of ideas.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
By waiting about 1 minute while folks can clear the room who wish to clear the room.
Administrators on this subject, please list practical steps
You have 2 minutes.
Well, what I attempted to do here was just because evolution is taught so dogmatically that we introduce a balance so that kids, instead of being taught that they're nothing but an animal that's sprung up from a primordial ooze, if they are taught that, and they are taught that, then their attitudes are, well, if there's nothing after this life, then eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And that's why we have on the graphs, after God was effectively kicked out of the schools in 1963, pregnancy outside of wedlock, all the curses that the Bible talks about are being perpetrated on this country. And what I'd like to see happen is a groundswell of support so that the State Board of Education will be able to make a determination as to whether this, in fact, can be taught in our public schools. And again, since Darwinism is a religion talking about trying to make the evidence fit your presupposition, that's what the Darwinists do. And so if we're going to teach one religion, then we need to teach a balance. And if Darwinism is not taught dogmatically, and people can have an open mind, and teachers have more freedom to teach what they would like, then we wouldn't have to go to this extreme.
Time. Thank you, Mr. Matthews.
Because this to me is the real psychology behind the beliefs of creation, creationists in general, creation science in particular. That is the fear that the lack of belief in God, which is not at all implied in believing in evolution. As I said, 40% of American scientists believe in God, so apparently either they're completely ignorant or it is okay to have both. In any case, it is. That without that, though, the attitude would be eat, drink, and be merry. That is, without God, you can't be good. Maybe you can't. Maybe that's a statement about you, and you believe it. If the depth of your moral character can go no further than the only reason to be good is because God said so, or He's going to give you a reward at the end, or your fear of punishment, then, well, God help us.
And Ventura County voters, be assured that candidates for board positions are not indoctrinated so in religion that they carry their beliefs into the curriculum in any way in our elementary and high schools. Then, like Vista, California, we have the problem of ousting them.
They believe in and what they intend to do as a board member. I think that's a simple answer to that. And you need to make sure that you have the opportunity to find out what board members are about. I would like to, while I have a few extra minutes, talk about some of the other issues that are before us. I want to say that I think I answered the question.
He has 2 minutes to respond in any way he wants to respond.
I think one of the issues that really we need to keep in mind is that the board policy of the State Board of Education said nothing in science or any other field of knowledge shall be taught dogmatically. Nothing. A dogma is a system of beliefs that is not subject to scientific test and refutation. In essence, evolutionary theory may well be repudiated one day because it is a scientific theory. That's the basis of it being a scientific theory. It goes on to say philosophical and religious beliefs are based, at least in part, on faith and are not subject to scientific test and repudiation. I think that's the basic issue here of whether something is taught in science or in a social science or language arts curriculum. Creationism and origins of life can be taught in public schools and should be taught in comparative religion and in history classes. But it's clear from the court cases and from the direction that we're given that creation science is not considered a science, and evolution, according to the court cases in 1990 that are beyond the 1987 case and 1994, creation science is not considered a religion. I mean, evolution is not considered a religion. In fact, it's stated that it is not a religion.
Inferring that what we needed to now notice, don't, if you elect Christian or believers to the school board, that's disaster. We got to make sure only the atheists, the unbelievers get in there and put their agenda through. Oh yes, that was a clear inference. What can we do to keep these people out? Now, the Supreme Court of the United States is the supreme law of the land. And unless that Supreme Court ruling is overturned by the Supreme Court, it is the supreme law of the land. And they said you can teach creation science in public schools. Evolution said based upon that decision, you can teach creation science in public schools. And anybody who says otherwise is either ignorant or not being honest about it. The Supreme Court has said you can, and evolutionists, prominent evolutionists, Stephen Jay Gould said you can, and you can teach it. Now, not in a religious class, not in something like that. If evolution is taught in science, let's teach creation in there. If creation is taught in philosophy class, let's get evolution over there. Let's do it fairly, but let's do it in an unbiased fashion. And let all the evidence be presented. Why is Dr. Weiss and others so afraid of the scientific evidence for creation? If it doesn't, we don't have support, it won't go over with the students. And if there is something there, the students have the right to hear it. They should have the right to hear it. They must have the right to hear both sides of this question.
Green Sea has parted. Okay, everyone, if you wanted to stretch out and go in the back, feel free. Okay, I just wanted to put in my 2 cents. There's a saying that I've heard. They say, if atheism is a religion, then baldness is a hair color. That's my husband's favorite joke, because he's bald. But anyway, okay, all kidding aside, this is just, somebody wrote this question, which I think is interesting because, well, I'll read the question and then I'll tell you why. It just says, is there not a simple solution to the topic here? Just get rid of the public schools. See, I'm a libertarian, I say yes. Okay, we're going on. A question for Dr. Gish.
Our next question is to Dr. Gish. Do you support academic? And incidentally, now, just so that we understand, he will have 2 minutes to answer this, then one of the fellows from the other side can respond, and we'll go on to the next question. Dr. Gish, do you support academic freedom to teach that acceleration in Earth's gravitational field is something other than 32 feet per second? Would you ride in the first airplane designed according to this alternative theory of physics?
Of course, that is a merry attempt to produce ridicule and not ask a sensible question. If there is scientific evidence that the acceleration of gravity is more than 32 feet per second, that certainly should be presented. Yes, I would certainly suggest that. Now look, no theory should be frozen in dogma. There are certain, like these constants, we have established constants by repeated observation. Never has that constant shown anything else. We accept it then, you see. But we don't bring in some of these odd ideologies. I would agree with the skeptics, and they are fighting some of this nonsense that people believe in. I would agree with them. But they put creation in with all this other nonsense, group it together. Why? I'll tell you why. Because creation requires a creator. It requires a supernatural. It's God is the creator. He's the Lord and Master of all things that he has created. There must be some relationship between the created and the creator, and God controls our destiny. That's what they don't like. And that's why they dogmatically will accept evolution as a fact. If I'd asked Dr. Shermer, is evolution a fact? He would say, yes, it's a fact. Now, what is undogmatic about that? What is tentative about that? Evolution is a fact. Let's go from there. Creation is not even a possibility.
Be confirmed to such a degree, it would be perverse to withhold our provisional assent.
I agree.
That's all. That's it. Now look, it seems to me we have a conflict here from Dr. Gish. Evolution is not a science. It's a dogma, it's a religion. And it shouldn't be taught in public science classes, and neither should creationism. So, but he wants to have creationism taught in public science classes. I think what he really wants is not equal time, but all of the time. Well, you're contradicting yourself. First you say evolution is a religion, right? And therefore, according to the Constitution, the law of the land, it should not be taught in public science classes.
You said that. You said religion should not be taught.
Oh, do you think it should be taught? You think religion should be taught in public science classes? Okay, apparently so. And finally, in my last 30 seconds, if evolution is wrong and does not explain how all this came to be, then what did it? Other than it did it. Next one. Hey, you got it.
Next questioner, if evolution is true, where are the fossils to prove it? Were there any ever found?
Okay, here's one of the clever ploys of creationists. Here's a fossil. Here's a fossil. Show me one transitional fossil in the fossil record. Show me one. And so we do, time and time again. For example, the last time I debated against UCLA was the week that the journal Science published the transitional fossil from land mammals to marine mammals, a beautiful transitional fossil called Ambulocetus natans, a land-type marine mammal. So there I put a transitional fossil between the two fossils, and without missing a beat, Dr. Gish says, now there are two gaps in the fossil record. I laid two fossils to fill those gaps. And it goes on and on and on. Now look, we don't have billions of fossils. This is incorrect. He said there's billions of fossils in the Cambrian fossils. This is not true. I was just there. I was at the Burgess Shale digging fossils with the big guys up there. There are few and far between. There's hundreds. Not billions, not millions, not hundreds of thousands, not tens of thousands, not even thousands. There's not many. So the chances of there being transitions are very slim, yet we still have a lot of them. That's the amazing
Dr. Patterson wrote back to my friend, thanked him for the letter, and said this: it is true, I have no examples of transitional forms in my book. If I knew of any, either among the fossils or the living, I certainly would have included it. You say I should have an artist illustrate what these things look like. Where would you get the evidence from? I could not supply it, and it'd just be artistic license. Colin Patterson, a senior paleontologist at the British Museum of Natural History, an evolutionist, said, I would have put those transition forms in my book if I knew of any, either among the fossils or the living. But he did not. And he was an honest evolutionist, a very fair evolutionist. And what does Gould say? Gould says there's two main features of the fossil record. Stasis, no change. Secondly, no transitional forms. I thought that was evidence for creation.
Time, 2 minutes.
Dr. Gish, you have the next question. This world, who created God?
Oh, I love that question. You see, there's two possibilities, ladies and gentlemen, about origin. See, ultimately, our ultimate source had to exist forever. There could never have been a time when there was absolutely nothing, suddenly there was something. So you have to believe either in eternal matter or eternal God. You can't believe in eternal matter. The universe is running down. If the universe had been here forever, it would run down a long time ago. It hasn't run down yet. So it hasn't been here forever. Many scientists believe even the proton decays with time. Is the eternal God. If God has existed forever, you see, and that is what's claimed for his existence, that he has always existed. And you see, that's reasonable. That's the only solution. Whatever our ultimate source had to exist forever. It could not have been material. It could not have been matter, because matter cannot be eternal. It has been said by one conquered evolutionist that the universe had a beginning. He says we don't have absolutely no explanation for that scientifically. He says it brings us back to that biblical statement, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. He says it's just as if the scientists were climbing this mountain, when they got to the top, they found the theologians who had been sitting there all the time. No, this universe cannot be eternal. Matter cannot be eternal. Where did we come from? Maybe Dr. Shermer can answer that question. Where does the source of matter? Where does matter come from? Where do the natural laws come from? Where were their origin? Who created them? How did they happen to be? The laws come from a lawgiver. The natural laws had to have a lawgiver. That's right.
Well, these are big, deep questions. What was there before time began? How long is a piece of string? I mean, look, the human mind is quite remarkable. It's big enough to ask some pretty amazing questions, but perhaps not big enough to answer all of them. I fail to see any difference between asking, well, what was there before the Big Bang? And maybe there's answers to that. Stephen Hawking attempts as well. Okay, there was the quantum fluctuation in the quantum foam or something. Okay, well, what was before that? Well, there was another bubble universe, and that there are perhaps multiple bubble universes. And we are just one of many multiple bubble universes. But of course, you can ask, yeah, but where did those bubble universes come from? And so on, ad infinitum. I just don't see any difference between asking those set of questions and asking, it did it. Well, where did it come from? Well, it didn't have to come from anywhere. Then why can't we say the universe didn't have to come from anywhere? It just always was and always shall be. What's wrong with that? Look, these are just words we're using here, folks. This is language. We communicate with language. And whether you call it an alien, or it, or God, or the bubble universe, these are just letters strung together representing concepts that we have constructed. That's all it is when we're talking about those deep, deep, far-reaching questions. And that if you push it far enough, you simply are going to end up with a question mark. And that's perfectly okay. We don't have to have final, absolute questions. The world will not fall apart. You won't go to hell in a handbasket. You won't become immoral. Believe me, it's okay to ask those kinds of questions and end up with a question.
If evolution has no experiment, then why do you tell your science teachers they must teach evolution as a science?
So if you actually took a course in evolutionary biology, which I find when I talk to people who don't believe in evolution, and by the way, I don't either. It's not a belief. It's just a method. It's a model to explain things. It may be right, maybe it's wrong. I mean, you know, be open about this stuff. It's not a belief system. But when I find people who don't believe it, or however you want to say it, I find that they actually know very little about it. Like this question. In an introductory evolutionary course, you would be exposed to hundreds of experiments, just really basic stuff in the first book you would read about evolution. There's lots of them. Look, these are historical experiments by which we can use a comparative method. For example, it is quite falsifiable. If you were to find British shale trilobites in, let's say, Cretaceous bedding plains with dinosaurs, we'd have a serious problem, but you don't. Never, not one trilobite ever made it up. Now, maybe he floated down in the flood, and every last one of those trilobites in the flood drowned first before the dinosaurs drowned for some reason. And although they're lighter and should float, somehow they sank to the ocean. There's not one exception to that. Look, and that fossil bedding sequence, by the way, was all established well before 1859, long before Darwin even understood evolution or even thought about it before it was even born. Creationists structured the bedding plains. They said it was God who put the fossils in all those beds, fine, but it was them that established the sequence, not evolution. Okay. All right, so that's one experiment, and there's thousands of them. It depends on which science you take. Population genetics.
2 minutes up.
All right. Let us suppose it's really true. Let us suppose trilobites were really way back there before dinosaurs came about. Where did these trilobites come from? So you didn't answer that question. Absolutely no evidence that trilobites evolved. Not one shred of evidence that they came from anything else. They have popped into the fossil record fully formed. And I tell you, trilobites are very complex. They have eyes with 600 lenses, perfect, undistorted vision. They use several principles and laws of optics to construct perfect eyes. Every eye underwater must be a double lens to avoid distortion. They are all double lenses. That trilobite appears fully formed. I don't care where you find trilobites. The bottom of the Grand Canyon, you can find it at the top too. There is not one shred of evidence that they evolved. And that's the important thing, ladies and gentlemen. You've got to have those intermediate forms. You've got to have ancestors. You've got to have that if they evolved from something else. And there's absolutely total lack of evidence there. And so, see to that. But let us suppose the geological column is correct, exactly as it is accepted today. Does that prove evolution? Not in this life. There's many creations who accept that. Many progressive creationists believe God did create each basic kind. But they know the evidence shows that those things did not evolve from some preceding form. There's no evidence for that. And we've got to have it, ladies and gentlemen. Every phylum in the animal world is distinct and separate from every other phylum. All the invertebrate phyla are separate. There is no connection. Discontinuity in every case. There's a total discontinuity between the invertebrates and the vertebrates, the phylum Chordata. There is total discontinuity, no continuity, and that's what you have to have if evolution is true. Creation would predict discontinuity. That's what we find in the fossil record.
Dr. Gish, if you intend
Religion brought into schools. We don't want humanism. We don't want Hinduism. We don't want Christianity. We don't want any religion brought into the public schools. The Supreme Court has made very clear that's not forbidden. Now, when I was a child, we hand out Bibles when I was a child in the schools. Now, you know what they hand out today, and it's not Bible in our public schools. So, we cannot bring any of that in here, and we don't want that. You see, the evidence is trying to say we want to bring in our Christian religion and shove it down the throats of our children. No, that's not what we want. We don't want their religion. We don't want our religion. We don't want anybody's religion. We want the scientific evidence, solely, separate from all religious ideas or literature, taught in our public schools. If we want to teach otherwise, what do? We buy the land, build the buildings, and pay the teachers in our Christian schools. If evolutionists want to teach evolution and humanism exclusively, let them buy the land, build the building, and pay the teachers.
It is not because it's a religion. It's not taught because it's a dogma. It's not taught because we all swore when we, at whatever point in our school careers, learned the truth with a capital T. That's not how it works, folks. It doesn't work that way. This is science. It's constantly changing. I'll repeat myself one more time that if you want to do science and be in science, you got to actually participate in the process. We have yet to hear tonight anything other than it did it as the science of creation. Here's all we've heard. Here is all we have heard is evolution is wrong, God did it. We want God taught in public science schools. That's all we've heard. I'm cutting right through the chase. That's it. Have we heard anything about how God did it? How do you think he did the little flagellum thing? Are you in the least bit curious? I mean, did he use telekinetic powers to push the protein molecules around the flagellum? Do you think he did that? How do you think it did this? And what if it wasn't God? What if it isn't God? What if it is an advanced extraterrestrial intelligence that designed this? Is that part of this? Are we willing to explore that as a possibility? Okay, so look. This idea that evolution is a religion is just false. It isn't. You're free to participate in the scientific process anytime you want. The halls are open. The conferences are open for anybody to attend. The journals, you can submit your papers and so on. If you do good science, there is no conspiracy to keep good science out of journals. There simply isn't. If that were the case, there'd be no changes in revolutions in science, and quite the contrary.
Thank you, Dr. Darwin. Thermodynamics apply to evolution, and are we going to teach that?
What has that got to do with whether creationism should be taught in public schools? That's the question. No, that's the question.
May I interject here? Our questions are slim pickings, I'm telling you. getting.
Okay, all right. Fine. That was my question. All right, so we're off topic. That's all right. Okay, the question is how does the input of energy into a system affect change in the system? Well, you can take courses on this. This isn't something you explain in 30 seconds. This is science, right? This isn't the Bible where you say, God did it, and now we can go home. There's a whole process to this, right? I mean, the sun, photosynthetic energy, the process of the Krebs cycle, and so on and so on. I mean, this is, basic high school chemistry and, biology, and you get to college and you take these courses. It's not the kind of thing you say in a debate in 30 seconds. This is science, right?
Yeah, too. That was my question. You're not answering my question.
Please, it's not the kind of thing that you read in church. Again, if we're going to teach Christian creation science, what about Krishna creation science? There is such a movement. The belief that humans have been here billions of years in a long cycle where all the evidence gets erased in the fossil record and the geological processes, but that in this Krishna belief, and ladies and gentlemen, don't laugh and snicker. I know these guys. They're intelligent, thoughtful people that really believe this, okay? They don't agree with you, but you don't have to laugh at them just because they believe that. But if we're going to teach that, and they believe it's hard science, they have archaeologists and paleontologists on their staff. They have a school, like he has a school. They have a journal. They have books and so on. They would love their Krishna creationism to be taught in public schools. But it's not science, so it's not taught.
Neither is evolution.
Dr. Gish?
Well, of course, he talked a lot about everything else, never answered the question. He thought about, notice what I said, the second law of thermodynamics, Dr. Shermer, applies without exception to isolated systems. In your view, the universe is an isolated system. It does apply, and you can't go from disorder to order, from simple to complex, according to the second law, in an isolated system. You cannot do that. Now, you mentioned photosynthesis. What in the world does that have to do with this question? Where did these photosynthetic organisms come from?
That's where it starts, sir.
Oh, that's where, no, it didn't start. It started with, you said, energy coming from the sun. Hitting what? Simple molecules like carbon dioxide, water vapor, and nitrogen. That's the only thing now that geologists know ever existed on this earth. Do you mean to tell me that's going to convert those things into photosynthetic systems? No, photosynthesis is an incredibly complex system, and it doesn't operate in a vacuum. It has to be in an organism that has an incredibly complex system. That you can convert visible light into chemical energy. But you're not accounting for that. You're starting out with that. Very nice, but it doesn't work. You've got to account for that origin. The laws of thermodynamics tells us everything runs down. Your body, our houses, our machinery, everything runs down naturally. Dr. Shermer, if there's some way to get around the second law of thermodynamics, I have a challenge for you. You're an open system. You're an incredibly complex machine. You can take in plenty of energy. Why don't you live forever? If you get around the second law, you can get around the second law and live forever. You can't get around the second law. The second law is going to destroy you. You're going to go to a pile of dust, Dr. Shermer. You won't get around the second law. But if you get around the second law with simple energy coming in and outside, go ahead, live forever. You can't do it. Water is stuck around the water for air and heat for ages of time to finally evolve into a wave. Now that is nonsense to begin with. Do you mean to tell me some wolf-like animal is going to leave the nice environment of the land where he lives and have a nice living and all those animals he can catch and eat and go and stand around in the water and evolve gradually into a whale? Well, I'd like to show, I wish I could show my slide, these so-called intermediates. And they go from enormous size to very tiny size and so forth and so on. And that idea is just simply nonsense. Those things are not intermediate, they're not transitional forms, and anybody who believes a wolf-like animal evolved into a whale, well, of course you have an argument with your fellow evolutionists. Some say that they came from a crocodile-like animals. Others say it came from something else. And so you have all kinds of arguments what they evolved from. But anyhow, this idea, it's just sheer nonsense. They have some of these things. We have snakes that might have, say, pelvic bone or something. They use that to clean during reproduction. They use that actually for gripping the ground. It has a function. These so-called vestigial organs, now known, simply do not exist. They went from 180 down to practically nothing today. These so-called vestigial organs are not vestigial. They have a true function. We've discovered that the tonsils, the appendix, the pituitary gland, and all these other things supposed to be vestiges left over from animal ancestors known now to have a true
Time, 2 minutes up.
Dr. Sherman, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, for those of you that want to see what we're talking about, this young man right here is a picture of it. He'll be happy to share it with you afterwards. Yeah. We don't have a slide show here. Now look, let me tell you where the action is when we're talking about evolutionary biology. The action is in discussing things like adaptationism in the study of certain structures and functions, like the hind legs that are embedded in pythons. Why do these pythons, why would God put these hind legs in pythons? They have no function. They're not used for walking. Well, they are used for other things, like for mating, for grasping on, things like that. Now the question is did evolution use an adaptive function for that originally, or did it have some other function and then adapted it later? And this is the big debate between like Richard Dawkins about progress in evolution and adaptationism versus Stephen Jay Gould, where there's an element of contingency and chance in evolution. That's where the action is, folks. That's where the science is. It's really exciting. These guys are having great debates, and very heated and so on. And these transitional fossils. Now look, we cannot think of let's say, a polar bear sitting there on a glacier near the North Pole, thinking, I gotta become a whale, gotta be a marine mammal, gotta get those paws out there, you know, I'm gonna become a marine mammal. I try real hard. It doesn't work that way. Polar bears are not becoming anything. They're well adapted for doing exactly what they're doing. Now, polar bears may become marine mammals, let's say global warming, the ice cap melts, it warms up, they go into the sea, or maybe they just go extinct. Look, this idea that evolution has a direction to it, and that's how species change from one another is completely false and a misunderstanding.
Time, 2 minutes up.
Thank you, Dr. Sherman. Can you describe the issue of the Scopes case and what the verdict was, since it was mentioned earlier?
Yeah, the Scopes trial is, I have a whole chapter on that in the Creation of Louisiana trial in my Weird Things book. And in the early 1920s, a number of states passed anti-evolution laws. The American Civil Liberties Union was a young fledgling organization trying to put itself on the map, looking for an event to really land itself. They advertised in a number of newspapers in Tennessee to challenge the Tennessee law. Sitting around reading the newspaper at Old Man Robinson's drugstore in Dayton, Tennessee, were the town booster and Robinson and the mayor and so on, and they saw this ad and they said, hey, let's do that. This will bring good business for the town. Who teaches the biology class here? And it turns out it was the principal, you know, because in those kinds of high schools, the principal also teaches the biology and is the track coach, you know. But he was a fundamentalist, and he wasn't going to teach evolution. But as it turns out, he was out that semester, and they had a young freethinker named John Scopes from a different county who was subbing there. And as he told us in his autobiography decades later, that he decided to stay around for the summer because he was interested in this girl, and he thought it'd be fun to stick around and so on. So he actually, you know, gave a little lecture. They did the mock arrest and so on, and he was put on trial. And you know the rest of the story. William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow and so on. The verdict was this, that he was found guilty. And of course, that's what they wanted. They wanted him to be found guilty, to challenge it, appeal it, and to the state Supreme Court, challenge it, appeal it to the U.S. Supreme Court, to have all those kinds of laws. But that was the overall goal. They never got that because the judge dismissed the jury and fined Scopes $100. As it turns out, a technicality in Tennessee state law, any fine over $50 has to be levied by a jury, not a judge. When it finally went to the appeal court, the state of Tennessee was embarrassed by the whole thing because of the publicity, and they were being called backwater Neanderthals and so on and so forth. So they just wanted to dismiss it.
Time.
They dismissed it on that technicality. And that was
Minutes up.
that.
Thank you, Dr. Shermer. Dr. Gish, you want to comment?
Yes, I do. Of course, that law in Tennessee was unconstitutional. It violated the academic and religious freedoms of those people who believe in evolution or believe otherwise. But required them to teach creed. That was unconstitutional. Should never have been on the book. Now we're 180 degrees in the opposite direction. You heard what I said here by the superintendent of public schools in Ventura County. We are forbidden to teach creation in a public school. We can only teach evolution 180 degrees in the opposite direction. Just as clear a violation of the academic and religious freedom of the people in the county of Ventura as that Tennessee law was. And it should never be the case here under our pluralistic democratic society. By the way, the film Inherit the Wind was a tremendous distortion of what went on down there. And books on this have been written not by Christians, not by creationists, but by evolutionists and others who are not Christian, and they state in those books that this was a complete distortion. Those were not a bunch of ignorant rednecks down there that ridiculed people and all that sort of thing. They were good to those people and so forth and so on. And Brian did not make a fool out of himself as the film makes him on the film and so forth and so on. And of course, the mass media, as it is today, was almost totally on the side of evolution. Ladies and gentlemen, one big problem for the Christians today is getting our case in the newspapers and on television and places like that. They have a proper system with the ozone layer and photosynthetic organisms. Sure, life is possible, but you've got to have that to start with, and you didn't have that on the primitive Earth. You cannot have ozone in the primitive Earth. Therefore, you have no protective shield. Therefore,